snow. And it's because when they came ashore in October, the top of this little hill didn't have any snow, and every place else did. You can see it happening here in an early November photo. The birds in the foreground here, they're sitting there waiting. They won't lay their eggs on the snow. They have to be on solid ground. But the birds that are on that little ridge in the background, well, they're getting a possibly 3 or 4 week head start. And it's a very short summer, so you want to start as soon as you can. Similar photos from the same place, 10 days apart. And the top, basically look at where the red square is the exact spot in both photos. And the takeaway is that the bottom photo, 10 days later, has quite a significant amount more of bare ground showing. Now, the basic family unit of penguins that we talk about is a mated pair. And when we do a census of penguins, we don't count individual birds, we count mated pairs. For all the species, the males and females look the same with slight differences. The males are usually a little bit taller, a tiny bit heavier. Maybe their beak is a wee bit longer, but it's very hard to tell. And if you haven't been spending time in a colony, really seeing a lot of birds, it's hard to make that judgment call. But the thing about the penguin parents is you need 2 parents to raise the chicks. And you're going to be doing 3 main jobs. These will probably seem very familiar to you. Guarding. You've got to keep predators away, like skuas here. And of course, the penguins are going to sit tight and just guard their little spot. You've got to keep your eggs and your chick warm, protected from blizzards and such. And you've got to deliver food to them. And you can't do all of those things by yourself as a penguin parent, because let's say I'm out getting food to bring back to feed my chick. Well, I'm obviously not guarding, and I'm not warming that chick while I'm out getting food. So my partner needs to be there on the nest doing those things while I'm bringing food back. And both male and females swap out those duties quite equally. These 2 penguin chicks are already locked in mortal combat because they are competing for food from their parents' mouth. And so they're jockeying for position as they beg for food. And the one in front in this photo is winning because he or she, and you can't tell the difference at this stage, he or she has boxed out the sibling, pushed it back in where it can't get its head up to get a clear delivery of food. And what happens is the penguin parent will feed the chick that begs best. They don't divvy it out equally. If you beg better, you get more food. And of course, if you get more food, you grow a little faster, you get a little taller, makes it even easier to outcompete your sibling. And pretty soon, if there's not a lot of food around, one penguin chick will wither and starve to death. But in years when there's a lot of food available, the bird that begs well gets its fill, falls asleep, has a nap, and the parent still has some food available and will feed the one bird that doesn't beg quite so well. And in those years, both chicks will be reared. Now, as they get a little older, they get a little more demanding for food. Here, the penguin has found its mom has come back and is now chasing it, begging for food. And the reason that this bird, the adult here, is running away from its chick is that just out of frame here, there's another couple of chicks chasing, because the penguin chicks, they'll beg from any adult. They don't care, they just want food, and they'll beg from anything. But the parents will only feed their own chicks. And they're really aggressive to those that are not their chicks. They can tell the difference, it's remarkable, by their call. And I've spent, months sitting there huddled watching penguins and taking observations and hearing these little cheap begging calls. And, for a human, they're all the same. But penguins can tell the difference. So at a certain stage, when the chicks are old enough to be able to maintain their own body temperature, where they've got some good down coat on them and a little bit of blubber showing up now, they can sit and wait while both parents go to sea to bring food back at shorter intervals. And at this stage, the penguin chicks are just kind of sitting around waiting for meals. Yeah, some of them more successful than others. On a cold day, the penguin chicks from that same area tend to huddle together in a scrum like this to share body heat. But if it's a warm day, they'll spread out. Now I say warm day, this was probably 40 degrees Fahrenheit, say 3 or 4 degrees Celsius. There was no wind that day. Of course, the sun was shining, and these birds super well insulated, and they're trying to cool off. So they're lying like this to use their feet as radiators. They get off their feet, flush blood through there, and lose some body heat that way. Now, as they grow, they start to try to rub off the down, because as I said before, down, great insulator in air, horrible in the water. And this bird, you see, is molting the down as the first year feathers are growing in, and they tend to rub it off wherever they can reach. Obviously, the head is one of the tricky spots. If you're a penguin chick, you have to worry about predators basically from the time you're an egg. In the Antarctic, for example, there's a thing called a skua. In the temperate areas, there are falcons, there are foxes, there are all kinds of dangers for the chicks. And to take the skua as an example, this is a predatory gull-like bird. You've got a nice hook on the beak there. And they often will attack in pairs. Here's two trying to get at this chinstrap penguin nest. Now, here's the beauty of the sit-tight defense. Because if the penguin were to get up to chase one of these skuas, well, clearly the other one is going to just be able to waltz over and grab the chicks. So no, they sit tight and defend what they can reach without getting up. In this case, they were successful at driving off the predators, but of course that's not always the case. The skuas are effective. They take the penguin chicks and they do clean them up pretty well, because of course they've got chicks to feed too. And if there's anybody here in public relations who wants a real challenge, it would be to rehabilitate the public opinion about skuas. Because of course they eat cute penguin chicks, but they're just as important a part of the Antarctic ecosystem. Now, in the water, it's a different story. The chicks have to worry about predators on land and in the water, but the adults, who have been feeling pretty safe on land, have to worry when they go into the sea. And of course they have to go into the sea because that's where all their food is. There's a leopard seal just in front of the ice here. Here's one with the mouth open to show you why you don't want to just jump in the water. There's a leopard seal around. Leopard seals do eat penguins. There's a lot of dramatic footage about it. It's not the main part of their diet, but they do eat penguins when they can. They've got quite a large mouth on them. And so they're often patrolling the beaches near penguin colonies because, of course, the penguins have to commute out to sea to get food. In fact, you often find that the penguins come up to the beach or the edge of the ice and they don't just immediately jump in. They get there and they wait. And then other penguins come and wait with them, and more come and more come, and eventually you get this sort of critical mass of penguins and they all go pouring off. It was written or drawn for me like this by some kindergartners who I gave a talk to about penguins. This was on their thank you card, and I think they nailed it pretty well, except they've given each penguin its own ice floe, which is very generous of them. This is the photo that got them thinking like that. The penguins are coming out en masse, and the idea is that if you're jumping in the water and there's a predator there, you know, if you come in with 40 of your neighbors, the chances of you being the one eaten are reduced. Now here's a bird that did get bitten, and surprisingly, given the size of a leopard seal mouth, it was not fatally bitten. It managed to get away, it came back ashore and hung around our camp for a few days and healed up, and then went back out to sea, where of course it has to, because that's where all the food is. Now, penguins live, for the most part, in places that people don't. And so many species are free from direct impacts from human civilization. There's a few places in the world where they have been eaten or their eggs were consumed and stuff. That's barely happening anywhere these days. They're often found on islands that don't get large developments and such. But in different places, they do face different threats. And in fact, out of the formally recognized 18 species, 13 of them are currently considered threatened or in worse shape than that. For some, like the Magellanic penguin in South America, their numbers are declining because of changes in how much food they can get during the winter months when they're feeding off the coast of Argentina. Or they're swimming in some of the shipping lanes off the east coast of South America, and they often become fouled with oil that's been spilled, and that kills them by reducing the waterproofness of their feathering. But in some places, it's not even a question of those indirect impacts. It's something even more esoteric, like a change in the climate. Now, this scenario in the Antarctic, what you see here, that's a lot of ice in the water, and that's great from most penguins' perspective, because ice is a wonderful habitat under which to grow penguin food. And without going into the whole food web here, there's a lot of marine algae, the phytoplankton, and that gets eaten by krill and small fish, and they in turn get eaten by penguins. So this kind of seascape is great because it means a lot of room for the growth of the food source. But the distribution of ice is not consistent around the continent. So if we just look at the Adelie penguins, all those orange dots on the coastline, each one is a penguin colony. The areas circled in green are growing at the moment. Numbers are increasing. But in the red circle, they are decreasing. And what's happening basically is a change in the food availability as a result of warming temperatures. The Antarctic Peninsula, that area in red, which is where we're headed, is warming much faster than the rest of Antarctica. And that's impacting on Adelie penguin populations there. More dramatically, just last year, a study was published that showed a catastrophic loss of emperor penguins in one corner of the Antarctic. This map is showing you sea ice anomalies from 13 months ago, and the blue areas, the bluer the area you see, the more ice there is compared to the average amount of sea ice. And the redder the areas, that means the less, how much less ice there is compared to the mean. And for the most part, you can see there's one blue zone, but I want to zoom in on the Bellingshausen Sea there, circled, the darkest red on the zone here. Because there's a group of emperor penguin colonies nesting down there, and they were affected by the change in the sea ice conditions. Emperor penguins nest on the sea ice, not on land. So they're nesting on a solid bit of ice that's generally protected and connected to the mainland, so it survives the winter and the springtime. And it's a very convenient place to breed because it's close to the waterfront where you get all your food. But of course, it's vulnerable to the loss of ice. And in this part of the Antarctic coast, this is the Antarctic Peninsula landmass that you see here, and where we'll be visiting is kind of off to the top right-hand corner of this photo. Those different names, Rothschild Island, Verde Peninsula, etc., those are the names of emperor penguin colonies. And all of them failed to raise any chicks last year. And the reason for that is that the ice disappeared early, while the chicks were still wearing down coats and therefore not waterproof and therefore unable to survive being immersed in the Southern Ocean. These two photos are of the exact same area. On the left, inside that little circle, you see a dark smudge at the very middle of the circle. That is the penguin colony as seen by satellite photo. And if you look at the icebergs that are casting shadows there, those icebergs are in the exact same positions in the right-hand side photo. The black that you see in the right-hand photo, all of that black area is open water. So over the course of 2 months, this ice has all disappeared. And this is a crucial time for it to disappear because the chicks are not waterproof. at that stage of their lives. And so close to 10,000 chicks died as a result of this change in sea ice. Now, these kind of changes, well, they're unprecedented. We haven't seen them before, but as the trend continues with warming down there, we may see this sort of thing happening again. And it's why it's very challenging to take a bird like penguins that are so well adapted to live in harsh environment, to withstand the cold, to make a living in a place that we can't imagine it. When suddenly the conditions turn to look something like this, that's not a good thing for them. It's beautiful for us, Bluebird Day, but not a great place to live if you're counting on things being very cold. Now, the penguins around the world continue to enthrall people. I know many of you are looking forward to doing an excursion in the next few days. We are able to see penguins on excursions in Puerto Madryn, in Punta Arenas, in Ushuaia, in Stanley, and also from the ship itself, as our expedition leader, Dr. Norman Laska, mentioned earlier this morning with the introductions. If you've got binoculars, please bring them with you when you go out on deck. It'll help bring things in closer. But we're already in the zone of penguins. So as we approach the port tomorrow, for example, those of you who spend time out on deck might get a chance to see Magellanic penguins porpoising along in the water. So it's time to get excited about penguins, even if you're one of the 2 or 3 people who did raise your hand and said you hated them. I hope you'll at least appreciate them a little bit more from this presentation. Thanks very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Stardust Theatre for Production Showtime. Tonight we take you on a magical Christmas journey through song and dance with our Christmas show, How the Grinch Stole Christmas.